There is a place at the forefront of modern geopolitical tensions that goes unreported despite the major threat it has to global security. Kashmir, a land where beauty and conflict collide, where breathtaking landscapes mask the weight of a decades-old struggle. From colonial rule to partition, from wars to diplomatic standoffs, Kashmir's history is as complex as it is chaotic. Generations have witnessed shifting borders, broken promises, and battles fought both on the ground and in negotiation rooms. Despite attempts at peace, uncertainty continues to define the region. Caught between two nations and the aspirations of its people, Kashmir remains at the heart of one of the world's most intense disputes. So today, let's discover the journey of the Kashmir conflict, unraveling the historical events, political tensions, and unresolved questions. Before British rule, the region now known as India was a mosaic of kingdoms, empires, and princely states. The British presence in India began in 1600 when Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the East India Company, allowing it exclusive trading rights in the region. Initially, the company focused on commerce, establishing trading posts in Surat, Madras, and Kolkata. Over time, the British gained influence, and by the mid-18th century, they had transitioned from traders to rulers. The Battle of Plassey in 1757, led by Robert Clive, marked a turning point as the British defeated Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowla and secured control over Bengal. This victory laid the foundation for British dominance, allowing them to expand their rule across India. However, in 1858, following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British Crown took direct control, officially establishing the British Raj. So, as the British expanded their influence, the vast areas of the subcontinent were gradually brought under their control. They did not simply impose an administrative system on the newly conquered lands. They completely restructured social, economic, and political relations in ways that would have consequences for generations to come. However, under British rule, the princely states enjoyed a special autonomy even as they became subordinate to a colonial overlord. Kashmir, with its mystic beauty, was one of such princely state. Ruled by a Maharaja, Kashmir maintained its own system of governance, even as it became part of a larger colonial framework. But beneath the surface of this apparently harmless arrangement, colonial policies were steadily transforming the region. The British were primarily interested in the economic potential of the Indian subcontinent. They set up revenue systems that were meant to extract resources efficiently and integrate local economies into a global market dominated by Western industrial interests. So by the early 20th century, whispers of nationalism began to echo in India as well as the valleys of Kashmir. Finally, the British government, weary of the mounting pressure, decided it was time to leave. As the British rule ended in 1947, it paved the way for the partition of the Indian subcontinent into Muslim-majority Pakistan and Hindu-majority India. The boundary between the two nations was to be drawn by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer who had never visited India before. His task was to divide a territory with 88 million people based on religious demographics. The resulting boundary, known as the Radcliffe Line, stretched from the Rann of Kutch in Gujarat to the international border in Jammu and Kashmir. While the Radcliffe Line determined the borders of India and Pakistan, Kashmir was left out of the equation. Again, this was because Kashmir was a princely state, meaning it did not directly fall under British rule, but rather was governed by a local ruler who had the choice to accede to either India or Pakistan. And it was then that the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir emerged as a point of conflict. With a diverse population, predominantly Muslim, yet ruled by Maharaja Hari Singh, the region's fate was set on a knife's edge. As independence dawned, Maharaja Hari Singh initially hesitated to choose a side, but when some tribesmen invaded Kashmir's borders in October 1947, the situation abruptly shifted. Maharaja urgently asked Delhi for military help, but India made it clear that it would only send troops if the Maharaja first agreed to join India. So then, in the moment of desperation, the Maharaja signed the instrument of accession with India on 26th of October 1947, a move that set in motion the first violent confrontation between India and Pakistan. And in this way, the seeds of conflict were sown by historical circumstances that combined ambition, fear, and a deep sense of injustice. A legacy that continues to haunt the subcontinent even as new generations inherit its burdens and dreams. Next, the Indo-Pakistan War of 1947-1948, fought in harsh mountainous terrain and amidst bitter cold, not only redefined borders but also demarcated the ideological battle lines between two neighbours with long-standing historical ties. As armies clashed along the newly drawn ceasefire line, the line of control, the region transformed from a peaceful retreat into a symbol of national pride and perpetual grievance. The United Nations then soon intervened, urging both sides to resolve their differences via diplomatic channels. Yet the UN resolution, while planting the seeds of peace, also underscored the international community's inability to mediate effectively in a conflict so deeply filled with historical and emotional overtones. Now, while the War of 1947-1948 set the parameters of the Kashmir conflict, subsequent wars, most notably in 1965 and again in 1999 during the Kargil conflict, cemented the idea that Kashmir was not merely an isolated territorial dispute, but rather a battleground for broader regional rivalries. Additionally, during the 1980s and early 1990s, Kashmir saw the rise of an insurgency that was much more about local grievances as it was about external interference. After the 1987 state legislative assembly elections, disputes over some results led to unrest in Kashmir. This unrest then gave rise to militant groups, marking the beginning of the Mujahideen insurgency. During this period, the situation turned from political protests to widespread armed resistance. The consequence was a vicious cycle of violence. Episodes of brutal street battles, militant attacks, and counter-insurgency operations became a grim routine. Checkpoints, curfews, and the ever-looming presence of armed forces transformed once peaceful lanes into locations of secret meetings and sometimes bloodshed. Eventually, the international community started taking a closer look at the conflict. However, neither India nor Pakistan was willing to make the compromises necessary to satisfy the long-promised plebiscite. Instead, both nations deepened their military and strategic commitments to the region. And in this evolving scenario, Kashmir became much more than just a territorial dispute. It came to symbolize the tensions between national aspirations and international strategic interests. Also, for the Kashmiri people, this new chapter of conflict was marked by a stark dichotomy. On the one hand, there was the pride of being custodians of a land renowned for its natural splendor and rich cultural traditions. On the other hand, there was the constant fear of violence, a fear punctuated by frequent gunfire, bomb blasts, and the scars of curfews that disrupted education, commerce, and even the simple pleasure of communal gatherings. Now, beyond the bloodshed and the lingering sorrow, the Kashmir conflict has been discussed at diplomatic arenas and efforts have been made to resolve the issue, but they have usually failed. Like in 1972, following the traumatic events of earlier conflicts, India and Pakistan signed the similar agreement. It was a peace treaty signed on the 2nd of July 1972 in Shimla, the capital of Himachal Pradesh. Its main objective was to end the ongoing conflict and hostilities between India and Pakistan, paving the way for improved relations. The treaty outlined steps for normalization of relations between the two nations and establishing key principles to guide their future diplomatic and political interactions. Now, while the agreement was a landmark gesture of goodwill, it failed to fully address the core issues at stake in Kashmir. Over the years, multiple rounds of negotiations have punctuated this ongoing struggle. In 1999, following the Kargil conflict, there was a renewed talk of peace even as the scars of war remained ever fresh in public memory. Also, during the 1990s and early 2000s, both nations engaged in Track 2 diplomacy involving informal dialogues between scholars, retired officials and non-governmental actors. Confidence-building measures such as bus services across the line of control and trade agreements helped reduce tensions but did not address the core political dispute. Then, in the mid-2000s, Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf proposed a 4-point formula including demilitarization, self-governance, unchanged borders and joint supervision by India, Pakistan and Kashmiris. While this plan generated discussion, India did not fully accept it, leading to its abandonment. Also, international organizations, including the United Nations, have consistently called for dialogue rooted in mutual respect and recognition of Kashmir's distinct identity. But each time the global community attempts to guide the process towards lasting peace, local aspirations and historical grievances prompt a reconsideration of externally proposed solutions. However, despite diplomatic efforts, peace between India and Pakistan was shattered in November 2008 when militants attacked Mumbai, killing 166 people, including 6 Americans. Lashkar-e-Taiba was blamed, briefly uniting both nations in the pursuit of justice. That fragile hope of cooperation resurfaced in 2014 when Prime Minister Narendra Modi invited Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to his inauguration. However, India cancelled talks in August after Pakistan's High Commissioner met Kashmiri separatists. By 2017, more than 3,000 violations had been reported along the line of control, and in the first half of 2018 alone, nearly 1,000 more incidents occurred. However, in May 2018, India announced a Ramadan ceasefire in Kashmir, the first in nearly 2 decades. But the temporary truce was short-lived as military operations resumed just weeks later. That same month, India and Pakistan formally reaffirmed a ceasefire along their disputed border. But tensions erupted once again in February 2019 when a suicide bombing struck a convoy of Indian paramilitary forces in Pulwama, killing at least 40 soldiers, the deadliest attack in Kashmir in decades. India swiftly retaliated with airstrikes. Eventually, Pakistan countered with its own airstrikes, leading to an aerial engagement that resulted in the downing of 2 Indian aircrafts and the capture of an Indian pilot.
What is your name?
Wing Commander Abhinandan.
Okay. I hope you have been treated well over here with us.
Yes, I have, and I would like to put this on record.
Then, notably, on August 5, 2019, the Government of India revoked the special status accorded to Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370. Following the revocation, the Indian government cut off communication lines in the Kashmir Valley, and to suppress potential unrest, thousands of additional security services were deployed. Violence continued till the next few years. Now, in the recent developments, on April 22nd, 2025, 5 armed terrorists attacked tourists in Pahalgam, killing 26 civilians. The assault plunged the region into turmoil. New Delhi blamed militant networks allegedly operating across the border, while Pakistan condemned the attack, calling it a deliberate provocation. Pakistan also proposed an independent investigation supported by China and Malaysia, but India rejected external probes. Eventually, on May the 7th, India launched Operation Sindoor, striking 9 targets in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistan claimed civilian casualties and retaliated with Operation Bunyan-Marsus, hitting over 20 military sites in India. Pakistani officials described their strikes as precise and proportionate, urging that they were necessary to counter Indian aggression. These incidents, echoing the shadows of the tumultuous past, serve as painful reminders that the wounds of partition and subsequent wars have yet to fully heal. For Kashmiris, each conflict threatens the peace that they long for. Looking ahead, the region's future remains uncertain, requiring solutions beyond territorial divisions. True stability demands addressing deep-rooted socio-economic inequalities and historical grievances, not just ceasefire agreements. Thus, regional and international policymakers must recognize Kashmir's complex history while ensuring its people can actively shape their own path towards lasting peace and prosperity. So, what are your thoughts about the Kashmir conflict? Make sure to share with us in the comment section below, and don't forget to like the video and hit subscribe to our channel for more interesting content. See you soon.